Hey friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn, and this video is going to be a little bit different for me. For one, it's going to be pretty long, and second, it's a stitching video. I'm actually going to show you beginning to end how I stitch together Fergus. So this is Fergus, a new collection by Spellbinders, and it's designed by first-time designer with Spellbinders, Sandy McIver. She does a lot of tutorial videos, and it's really wonderful that she's got her own collection now at Spellbinders. She does have her own video tutorials on how to do all of the stitching. That's available on the website at Spellbinders when you go to the product listing. But I'm going to show you how I stitched up my version of Fergus. So if you want to see how I put this together, I hope you'll continue, and if not, I'll see you on the next video. Now let's make this. I'm actually only going to use the base set, but there are two add-on sets. Now from the base set, this is everything that you need to die cut. There are some things that need to get die cut twice, like the front of the coat, the two sleeves, and the body, as well as the brim of the hat. And then there's going to be some pieces that you need three of, the nose and the two hands. And then some optional things that I've cut, like little stripe accents a few times. So we're going to start with the hat, and that's the triangular shape here. You just fold that in half. A lot of stitching is about where to hide the knots. And with the hat, we're actually stitching, and then we're gonna turn this inside out. So it's okay to start from the outside and leave the knot hanging, because when you invert this and turn it inside out, what we're looking at now that's on the outside will become the inside. Now there's basically three stitches that I use for my version of Fergus. This is called a running stitch. So you just go down, you line up all of the holes, you go down through both layers, and you want to line up the holes as you're going. If you need to, you can clip them. Then you want to travel across your felt, and then go up through both layers of felt, travel down to the next hole, and then go down both layers, and you just keep on doing that, up and down, traveling from, in my case, bottom to top. So I'm just going to keep going like this, and what you're going to notice is that your stitching is going to actually look like it's skipping. You'll have a line, it's like a dashed line. Now when you reach the top, you want to just go back down, and you want to fill in your dashed lines, so now it becomes a solid line. And so it'll be really natural, because the pattern is going to be the same. You're just going to continue that running stitch up and down, and filling in those stitching lines. Then when you get to the end, I like to knot it just so that it's nice and secure, and then turn everything inside out so that you have the seam is now going to be on the inside, and on the outside it's nice and finished. I'm using a pencil bone folder to just try to get the tip as pointed as possible. It'll be a little bit rounded, but just finagle it a little bit and be patient. You don't want to tear your felt. Okay, so once that's done, I am going to do what Sandy suggested, which is to do like a long running stitch right in the seam. So a long running stitch all that means is that you're just going to go up and down, just like we did before. But I'm doing maybe every 3 stitches, I'm going down and I'm coming back up 3 stitches later. And then when I get to the top, I'm going to come back down. And again, roughly, it doesn't have to be exact. 2 or 3 stitches is going to be the length of the long running stitch that I'm doing here. And the reason why we're doing this is because we're actually going to cinch this up a little bit. So now when you pull this taut, see how it's going to bend the hat? And that has a really neat effect. So this was a tip from Sandy in her video. It has that neat effect of really scrunching the hat a little bit so it looks like it's bending backwards. I love that little detail. It's quite nice because then your hat isn't just pointed straight up. So I think this makes it look a little bit more natural, and I like the effect of it. So I am just going to catch the other end where I started and then do a double knot. Anytime I tie anything, I just double knot it. And I actually don't super mind that there's loose thread. If you want, you could always just cut pretty close to the knot, but I just tuck it up inside the hat. I don't think anybody's really going to be taking the hat on and off, and so I don't mind it. Now, with the brim of the hat, I'm doing this actually a little bit different to how Sandy does hers. I just used a little bit of liquid adhesive and I'm gluing the two layers together. But I'm being very careful to make sure to line up the little dots that are the little stitching dots that the die cut out. I want to line those up, and the reason that she suggested to double up on the brim is so that it's a little bit more sturdy. And I kind of like this doubled up because it lets you actually manipulate the brim a little bit. You can like turn it up a little bit, turn it down a little bit, and give it a little bit more character when you're posing Fergus. So I really like that. What I'm doing here, I feel like is not required, but I did it and I don't hate how it turned out. But what I would suggest is that maybe the first time you do this, leave this out and see if it's okay. The only reason why I did this is so that it's just a running stitch and it's a loose one. So I'm just doing, again, every 3 holes or so, I am going in and out, in and out. And the reason why I am doing a loose running stitch is this is just meant to be temporary. It's just meant to hold these 2 layers together while I stitch the rest. But there's a couple things. One, I don't think it's necessary because the glue did a perfectly fine job of holding everything together. 2, these lines actually ended up being visible. And so if you're gonna do this, I would do a proper running stitch so that you don't have any gaps. I thought that once I stitched this to the upper portion of the hat, that it would turn in a little bit and that these lines would not be visible. That's not the case. So if you're gonna do this, I would again do a running stitch all the way around, which means going around twice so that you fill in the gaps, just like we did on the top of the hat, where the first pass you catch every other stitching line and then you turn back around for your second pass and you just fill in those gaps. Now here, what I should have done was this tail that is of a thread, I shouldn't have cut that off. In fact, what I should have done was just use that with the needle and pulled it through to start stitching it to the top of the hat. But if you have one of these tools which helps you thread your needle, you can correct this mistake like I am here. I just stuck that through one of the holes. You stick just like it was the eye of a needle. Just be careful, you don't want to tear your felt. And then I just pulled the thread through the hole. And that way we can, 1, hide that thread, and 2, we can start to stitch the brim to the hat, and everything's going to be really connected. And so So again, a little bit of a mistake on my part, but this is the first time I'm putting it together. I'm actually quite happy with how it turned out. But this is the only way to really learn things. Sometimes you do things once, and then even though I watched a tutorial, I wanted to just do things my way. And sometimes when you do things your own way, you have to discover these things for yourself. So I'm going to start stitching, and I want to give myself a knot so I don't lose the tail end of this thread, because it's nice to leave a long tail so that when you stitch and you're back around to the beginning again at the very end, you can tie off the two ends. Now for this stitching, we're not going to do a running stitch. In fact, I'm going to do a blanket stitch. So with a blanket stitch, basically it's a little bit different in that what I'm going to do is, as I try to line up the holes, I go through both layers, the hat and the brim, and then I catch the loop before pulling all the way through. And I'll show you that again. So you go through both layers, and then don't let that loop go all the way through. Catch it and put your needle through the loop. And what will happen is that you'll have a little line that actually, it gives you a really nice border actually. You're going to end up with a line that goes kind of on the outside. So this is a little bit of a finishing stitch so that you've got your stitching line essentially is on the perimeter of where the two meet up, and you'll see the stitching, kind of an up and down vertical lines through your holes. But it's a nice, pretty secure way of attaching these two pieces. And at the very end, I'm going to put one final blanket stitch in, and then I'm going to tie the two loose ends. So where I ended and the loose end at the very beginning that I left. And that's going to, I always do a double knot when I secure these ends, because it's just going to make it all the more strong and secure so it doesn't unravel. But it's, even though this is on the underside, and the blanket stitch is like a really nice finishing stitch, as I mentioned, and really nice border stitch. See how that looks? This is on the inside, so you're not going to see that, but it's also a really secure stitch because there's a lot of thread that's holding everything together. So here is when I realized, oh, you can see the stitching, that temporary stitching running stitch that I did. So now I'm going to go through and fill in all of those blanks. Now, at the end of the day, this little stitching line, it's a nice little detail. And I'm not even mad that it's longer stitches. Also, I kind of like that. If I were to do it again, I would do the long stitches. So it's every 3 holes, I think, is how long the stitch was. But I think if I were to do it again, I would make it a complete running stitch so that there were no gaps. And then everything is going to look a lot more consistent. But at the end of the day, I like how it looked. Now, I wasn't too sure if I wanted to use the accent stripe, so I'm going to leave that to the end and see how the outfit looks before I make that decision. These are the sleeves of the coat. So I cut, again, this is a recommendation from Sandy. I cut this out of the accent piece that's meant for the hat. And it works out perfectly to where, well, I line mine up a little bit differently to how Sandy lines hers. Mine, I put all the way flush to the bottom. And I'm just going to do, again, a running stitch along the bottom. So this little accent piece actually has 2 rows of holes. And when you're stitching this one, because we're going a little bit off script here, this accent piece has holes in it, but the sleeve does not have holes. This is sort of an optional detail that you can add. And I'm going to use a lot of this little trim piece because it's actually kind of a nice little detail. So I've got 2 shades of purple here because my hat was 2 shades of purple as well. There's the darker shade, which I used for the brim, and this lighter for the body of the hat. And I'm going to do the same sort of thing with the coat. I'm going to use the lighter purple for the body, the majority of the coat, and I'm going to use the darker purple for this trim here. But I'm going to use the lighter purple thread, and that's intentional so that it actually, again, acts as a little bit of a highlight. And so it's meant so that on this darker purple you can see those stitching lines. And I'm doing a running stitch, but I'm not going to complete the running stitch. I am leaving the gaps so that it's dashed lines all the way across. And that's just a design choice so that we have something a little bit different, something that's a little bit of an accent. And I then just trimmed it off at the end, and I repeat and did that again for my second one. Now I want to show you what happens when you run out of thread midway through. Don't sweat having to estimate exactly how much thread you're going to use, because it's really not that big a deal if you have too little thread and you run out in the middle. So all I do is I bring the loose end to the inside or the back and just tie a knot, tie a double knot. It's not the end of the world to have to put together 2 pieces of thread, because you're not going to really see this anyway, especially this piece. This sleeve becomes a pretty tight little tube, and there's no way somebody's going to look inside and be able to see that you've got some loose threads that are attaching to 2 pieces of thread here. So if you watch Sandy's tutorial, I think she gives you an estimate for how much thread to use for each piece, and she's very careful and a little bit more particular than I am. I don't really care if I end up with not enough, and so just don't stress about that is kind of my policy. You can just always attach 2 ends. Just make sure it's on the back side, and nobody's gonna see that. See, it's all finished. So now that we've got our accent piece in, our little trim piece, we just need to sew this little sleeve together as a little tube here. And so I'm gonna start. And so I do this a little bit different to how Sandy does it. She does this as a running stitch. I am going to do this as a blanket stitch. So we're on the outside, and I go through both layers, and before that I pull all the way through. What I want to do is make sure to loop my needle through that loop. And that way you end up with a line of stitching on the outside, right along sort of the outer perimeter of the stitching, or of the 2 ends, or the seam, I should say. So with a blanket stitch, you just need to go do 1 pass from top to bottom, and then you're done. And the reason why I did it this way is because I kind of I like the look of that blanket stitch. It adds a little bit of that nice little detail there, and it doesn't also, I kind of feel like it makes it a little bit more rounded than a running stitch. But definitely check out Sandy's tutorial if you want to see a different way of stitching the sleeves together. And then I just double knot the end and tuck it on the inside, and that's the sleeve. And so you'll want to repeat and do that for the second sleeve as well. Now for our coat. So with the coat, there's I'm gonna add some trim to this as well, and I'm gonna show 2 ways to do this, but I think the second way I did this was better. So this is one back piece, and then you have two front pieces. And what I'm going to do, you can see how short my thread is because I don't really, as I mentioned, I don't really care about running out in the middle. So I'm just going to keep going as far as I can with a running stitch up and down. So you go down, travel the length of the felt, and then go back all the way up to the top, and then turn around and go all the way down again. And so if you run out just of string, just do the same, or thread, just do the same thing I showed you earlier. Just attach another string to it like I just did, but attach it from the inside where you can hide those two ends, and then just continue. And so once you get your second pass done, then you have a solid stitch line. So remember, with the running stitch, pass number 1 gives you sort of a dashed line. Pass number 2 completes those dashes so that you have a solid line. And I'm just going to continue until this is completed, and then I'm going to add the trim detail to the front of the coat along the sort of that curved edge. Now, I mentioned that there's 2 ways to do this. The second way of doing this is to actually stitch this trim detail on first and then attach it. And I kind of feel like that's the better order of things, but it really doesn't matter, to be honest. So I'm gonna do the exact same running stitch that I did for adding this little bit of trim to the sleeve. So that means I'm gonna do just one pass of the running stitch so that I have dashed lines instead of a solid line, because this, again, it's just decorative. The other sewing that we did to attach the front of the coat to the back of the coat, that was also a running stitch, but that was a complete running stitch, and that is kind of functional to really hold everything together. So you really want a solid line, and you really want to do 2 passes. With this piece is purely decorative. It's just for show. I'm using a thread that's lighter than the felt, the color of the felt, so it's going to be very visible as well. And again, that's because it's decorative. So it kind of like the dash detail. Now, what do you do when you come around to the curve? So just bend your felt around. It's really as easy as that. So the outside curve is pretty easy because it's going to be a like a softer curve. And so you just want to line the trim right up flush on that outside edge, and just continue doing your running stitch up and down, keeping the 2 edges of your 2 felt pieces lined up on the outside. And again, because we are adding an optional sort of decorative piece here, your coat doesn't actually have holes. So when you're sewing here, you're actually having to create holes through your coat. Just make sure that when you're creating those holes, that it doesn't have to be super even on the inside, but just make sure you're not poking a hole that's too close to the edge, because you don't want to tear your felt accidentally. And this is going to be longer than what I need. And so when I get to the end, what I'm going to try to do is line this up with the stitching hole that was already there from when the front of the coat was attached to the back of the coat. And this is kind of why I think it's easier if you attach to this trim piece first. Because if you attach to the trim piece first, what I would do is just leave the last 2 holes of the trim, leave that unstitched, and then when you go to attach the front of your coat to the back of your coat, you can sew the trim to it at that point. You'll see it because I'm actually going to show you the second half of this or the other side of this coat. But once I reach the end, I just like to tie it at the end I actually put a stitch going upwards just to really keep that secured. And then I go back around to the beginning with that same running stitch, but I'm in the second line of holes at this point. But I really want to make sure that my stitches are stacked on top of each other so it matches that first. Now here we're at that curve. Now you're gonna find that you kind of need to bunch your felt up a little bit. It is going to have to get cinched together a little bit so that you can get your stitching every stitch in essentially, but just try to evenly spread it out a little bit so that you're not getting like a huge sort of fold in there. And take your time, work yourself around that little corner, and then once you're at that straightaway, it's smooth sailing from there. You can just, continue on with your stitches, get to the end, and then bring your thread to the back, and then tie it off with whatever loose thread you can find back there. And again, I always like to do a double knot anytime I am tying things off. So that is that's how you do one of the trims. And then once this is attached, you can just trim off that little excess that's hanging off. So with this piece, as I showed or mentioned, I should say, you can sew your trim on first. And I actually did this trim piece first because I wanted to just make sure it looked good. But I decided it after I had attached that first front piece of the coat. And then I thought, oh, how would this look with the trim? So I quickly just sewed together the trim on my second coat front to see how it looked. And that way, if it looked good, then I would go back and do it for the other one. But if it didn't look good, then all I would need to do is just die cut a new coat front, and you would never have known. So that's kind of how I discovered the fact that it's actually easier to sew the trim on first, leave your last two holes, basically the last column, I should say, the last column of holes, leave that unstitched so that when you go to attach it to the back of the coat, you can then sew it all together in one pass because it's just a straight line from there. So really easy. Again, now to attach the front of the coat to the back of the coat, just like how we did it on the other side, this is also a running stitch, but it's a complete running stitch. Go all the way up in one pass, and then travel all the way down in the second pass to fill in those gaps. So remember, running stitch, the first pass gives you a dashed line. And that's what I use for my accent pieces on the trim. And the two passes gives you a solid line and a lot more security. So anywhere that you are attaching two pieces and you want them to be secure, you definitely want to do a complete running stitch. Whereas if you're just doing something decorative, then do whatever you like, and maybe skip, you don't have to necessarily hit every hole. You could do longer stitches if you wanted. You can do a long stitch, a short stitch. You can kind of change it up. If it's just decorative and it's not there for to keep everything secure, then maybe there's some fun different patterns that you can do. So now I'm going to attach the sleeve to the coat. You want to pinch this down, flatten it up. There are some holes that the die cuts at the top of the sleeve, and you do have some holes that are at the top of the coat as well. And so you just want to line those up as best you can, and you want to kind of stack the seam of the sleeve with the seam of the coat. And that's the best way to kind of line up the holes. And you end up having 3 stitches going across. And Sandy suggests to actually go twice through this so that you're kind of doubling up on the stitches to really hold it in securely. And so that's what I'm going to do as well on her recommendation. And then I started and ended on the inside of the coat, and I'll just double knot these and tie them off. And once, I don't show it on camera, but I do end up tidying up all of those loose threads because the coat is actually removable. And so it's quite possible that somebody who's taking a look at the gnome might want to take the coat off. And so all the previous threads, I cut those off camera, but I did it for the sleeves as well. And so here you have our finished coat and the matching hat. So now we need the body, and I chose a nice complementary color to go with the purple, and we're gonna stitch so that we leave the tail on the inside. And this is also going to be a running stitch, so I'm going to just go up around the top. It's rounded, and you stitch all the way around, and you end up I'm on the right side here. You end up all the way on the left side, and you want to come back all the way around. So this is going to be a completed running stitch. And I am going, you don't really have to, you could probably use this thread to continue stitching, but I kind of want to just anchor these threads and double knot, and I'm just going to tuck this in because the body is going to get stuffed with some stuffing and some things that give it a little bit of weight, and so you definitely don't have to worry about loose thread. You can just hide that on the inside of the body. Now, one of the tips that I have, if you know that you've got like a long stretch of stitching ahead of you, you can pull out a lot of thread, but if you've done any stitching, hand stitching, then you know that the longer your thread on your needle, the easier it is to kind of get tangled up and, you know, a little bit knotted and whatnot. And so one of my suggestions is pull yourself a long stretch and then double up the thread. And so if you look, I'm not using a double thread, but a lot of the top portion of my thread is actually doubled up, and it helps to shorten the thread in a way, but you have a lot of thread, so you can kind of unravel that and as you go, and then that way you kind of have the best of both worlds. You have a lot of thread that's on the line, but it's doubled up and kind of revealed or loosened as you go, and that way you don't have to start and stop quite so often. Now I'm using just some polyfill to kind of stuff a little bit of this squishy stuff inside, and I'm using my pencil bone folder to really try to get it into the tip as much as possible so that it's nice and full, it's nice and sturdy. But speaking of sturdy, if you want this to sit well, you want to add something that has a little bit of weight. So I just took, this is where I differ from Sandy as well. I just took a little Ziploc bag and I put some flour in it. You could put whatever you want. You could put sand, you could put salt. This is just to give it some weight, and that way, you know, and I just really only needed it at the bottom, but that way you kind of have something that's still, you know, a little bit soft and malleable and whatnot, so it's not going to be like super stiff. So if you wanted to kind of still bend it, position it as you're posing your Fergus, you can, but it's got some weight, so it'll also stand really well. And then at the very bottom, I just put in a little bit extra polyfill, and that's so that I don't I make sure that I have a nice soft edge at the bottom, but I also make sure that that polyfill helps to push the bag of flour up a little bit, and that way it's going to be clear from my stitching. I don't want to accidentally poke my my bag and have that flour spill out. so the little bit of polyfill at the bottom is just to help me push that that flour, that little sack of flour basically in there. And again, that little baggie could be whatever you'd like. It could be salt, it could be sand, it could be sugar, whatever you have. I just used some flour from my kitchen. And I did a running stitch all the way around to attach the base to the body. And again, I'm gonna tie off and tuck the ends in, but I still have the line. I didn't cut this line. I'm not done with this. I want this base to be really secure. And so what I'm gonna do is a blanket stitch. So from the outside, I am going to go through both holes and then catch the loop, put my needle through this loop here before I pull it tight. And you're going to get a nice line of thread essentially on the seam of where the two pieces of felt meet up. So it gives you a really nice finish, and it's nice and secure also. So this was the same blanket stitch that that we did when I attached the brim of the hat to the top of the hat. And if you watch Sandy's tutorial, she likes to do this blanket stitch as a decorative stitch on the edges of her felt as well. And so I think that's a really great idea, but because there aren't any holes on the edges of the felt, so where I put that dark purple trim, that's where she did the blanket stitch. If you're comfortable with doing that without any holes and trying to get good spacing and all, go for it. I didn't feel quite so confident in my blanket stitching for that level of detail, so that's why I used the little trim piece instead. And I kind of like how mine turned out. And so once I finished the blanket stitch at the bottom here, I just tied it off, and then I tucked those tail ends into the body. So now we need the nose. This is pretty cool. I've never done a nose like this, and so this was a neat little, I guess, tool now, I guess, in my little tool box, because once you learn some of these basic stitches and techniques, then it's kind of cool. You can maybe even start to think of other things that you can do with it. So this is one of those circle pieces, and the other two will be the hands. And what I'm doing is a loose blanket stitch. So it's maybe like 1/4 of an inch or so. Just up and down, up and down. And so you get that dashed line. Now, when you come to the where you started, pull on both lines. You want to have both of them essentially on the inside of the circle. And you want to pull on both of them so that it cinches it up. And you get this little fun little, right now it just looks like kind of a dumpling to me. If you've gone to like dim sum, it kind of looks like shumai, if you've ever had it. So I'm gonna just put just a little bit of polyfill here to give it some body. This is gonna be the nose of the gnome, and I'm gonna pull as tightly as I can, but I don't want to pull super tightly because I don't want to tear the felt. Felt is not a super strong fabric. It will tear if you pull too tightly. So what I want to do is before I put some extra stitches to secure this, I just double knotted, and just to have it nice and secure so that I can just hold this without worrying about having to really pinch it closed. And all I'm gonna do is just take my needle and sew from one end straight through to the other end. And here's where I can kind of cinch it a little bit more firmly to really bring the ends in more closely. And also I'm looking to kind of see how rounded it is, and if there's one side that looks like it's not super rounded and it needs to be pulled in closer, then I'm gonna try to achieve that with this set of stitchings. So once I have the nose there, I'm gonna set that off to one side. And so far I've only used one needle for everything, but I'm gonna bring a second needle because I don't want to you could always, I guess, take the thread off of that needle that you've been stitching with the nose, but I just brought in a second needle, and I'm going to attach the beard. The beard is layered, and I chose white for the top layer and kind of a light gray just to have a little shadow. And I'm going to put a couple of stitches in to attach this to the top of the body. Sandy's suggestion is to leave about 1/2 inch at the top, and basically where you are putting in these anchor stitches, the nose is going to basically go right over that, and so it's going to hide it. But you want to stitch into the body also, because you want this to be attached to the body, and there will be more stitches when we attach the nose that will help secure everything as well. But I'm going right into the body. It might catch some of the polyfill, that's just fine. And then once I have a couple of stitches in, I am just going to do a double knot, and I'll tuck this line behind the beard. And so now I'm going to pick up the nose, which still has a long line attached to it, a long line of thread. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pierce through the beard, both layers of the beard, and I'm going to pierce through the body. And so the idea is that you want to attach, while you're attaching the nose, you're going to also anchor the beard to the body as well. So you're going through lots of layers here. And this is kind of imperfect, so all I tried to do is pull through and then catch, some portion of the body, and then come back out through the beard, and then through the nose as well. And the thing that you want to do is maybe try to anchor this in 2, 3, 4 different places. So I'm going to go back through the nose and then back through the body, but I'm going to try to anchor this in a different direction. That way the nose is kind of secured from, 2, 3 different spots through the beard and through the body as well. And give it a wiggle, see if it feels secure to you. If you feel like you need a couple more stitches, add a couple more stitches. If it feels loose anywhere, just maybe that's where you want to add a couple stitches. But always when you're adding the stitches, make sure you're going all the way through the body, but just through the top layer of the body, not all the way through to the back of the body. And so that's the tricky part. You just want to go through the top layer of the body, and then bring your needle back out, and then secure it that way. And then once you get to the end, Sandy suggests to just wrap your loose thread around the nose, and I'm gonna tie it off with the loose end from the beginning. And once you're done, you can just tie off and then hide the thread on the inside as well. So that's all there is to it with the nose. It's super duper cute. So now that we've got our nose, we're going to do something similar for the hands, except the hands aren't as bulbous as the nose. So I'm going to take again the same circle. I'm going to do that running stitch, and then that's it. I'm just going to flatten it, pull it tight, double knot the end, and just leave it flat because it's just going to be that's enough bulk for the hand, and then you want to do 2 of those. So I'm going to keep it on the line and then just sew it to the inside of my sleeve here. So with the sleeve, because I have the trim, it actually gives me the ability to just kind of sew this through the inside layer of the sleeve. So I'm not pushing the needle through to the outside. So you're not going to see any of this stitching that I'm doing. It's kind of tough to do. And so it's sort of like the nose, where you just want to go through one layer of your felt, and then every time you go through the felt, you want to bring it around so that it goes through the hand, and it's just a loose running stitch up and down through the coat, through the hand, as best that you can until you get to the end. And then I just do a double knot. And what I did was I brought the needle in and then I cut it, and it'll hide the tail on the inside. And then you just do the same thing on the other side of your sleeve. And so here is our finished Fergus. I'm just doing a little bit of a dry fit. The beard will actually be on the outside, but what I wanted to do was check, do I want to add that little accent piece to the hat? Because remember, I did die cut this trim piece, but I didn't sew it. I wanted to see how his outfit looked without it to start. And then I decided, yeah, I want to add this yellow band here to the hat. I think it's a nice look. So what I'm going to do is going to start stitching, and I start from the inside and I leave a tail on the inside. And I started to actually do this as a running stitch, just like how I added the trim to the coat. But then I decided, let's just do something different because we already have that. So if you've put some stitches in and then you decide you change your mind, pull your needle out of the thread, or pull the thread out of your needle, and then just pull the thread through and then undo your stitches. It's a lot easier to do that than trying to get your needle to backtrack out. So just take your thread off the needle and pull your thread through. So the stitching I'm going to do instead of a running stitch is a cross stitch. So with a cross stitch, you go in one hole and then you go diagonal. So I'm going to go from lower right to the diagonal upper left, then I go across to the upper right, and then down to lower left, and then I go, so again, this is the pattern. You go up from the lower right, across the top to the upper left. On the back side, you're going to go from the upper left to the upper right, and then across the top you're going to go to the lower left, and that creates an X. So I'm making an X from the bottom right to the upper left, and then the other half of the X is from the upper right to the lower left. And so I'm stitching right to left, and you just want to keep on going all the way around. All I'm doing is just making sure that the bottom of my trim is nice and flush with the brim of the hat, and that way we can keep it nice and level. When you get all the way to the end, it actually works out perfectly so that you have one final cross stitch. The first set of holes was just up and down to anchor it when we started, and then at the very end you get one final cross, and it looks really perfect. That actually turned out really well. Wasn't really sure how that would turn out, but it turned out nice. And so with threads all on the inside, I just did a double knot with the tail that we left at the very beginning. And then I can cut, once you tie this off, then you can cut it close to your double knot if you want. Again, I don't mind leaving long loose threads. So now let's take another little look at Fergus. I'm liking him a lot better with the trim. And then I turned around to the back and I thought, oh man, feels like his coat needs a bit of trim on the back. So I'm just going to add this extra bit of trim on the back, and then I think that really completes it. But I'm not actually going to show you that stitching. It's just more of the same. So there you have it. Now the trim looks really finished because it's going all the way from the front to the back. You've got the trim at the cuff of the coat as well. I'm really happy with how that turned out. And then you can just kind of tuck things and sort of position them however you'd like. I like to have the hat kind of tilty a little bit, and he stands really nicely. He looks really complete. Now, if you get any of the add-on sets, then you can add even more decorations and embellishments to him. But even by itself, it looks really awesome. I hope you enjoyed this video today, and let me know what you think of stitching and if you would make one of these Ferguses for yourself. Thanks again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.